Hey everyone, Mr. Anderson here. I want to demonstrate for you some of March of the Squires and we can talk about articulation. We talked about articulation some in our live lessons last week. This song can be played fairly boringly, as I'm going to demonstrate in a second, and even without changing the notes that I've written, it becomes much more interesting if we make sure we do the articulations that are written. I'm going to start by playing the A melody, that's from 5 to 21, without any specific articulation. I'm just going to generically tongue all of the notes. This is going to be the most boring thing I'm going to play all day long. Here I go. 1, 2, 3. Now that's pretty dull. I played all of the notes exactly with the rhythms that are written on the page, although I'll confess that I made a mistake at the end of measure 18. If you caught that, good for you, and I apologize. Um, what I want to do is make it more interesting. What the composer, that's me, intended was to have something that was in the style of a march. One of the keys to playing a march is having the contrast between long and short sounds. So I'm going to play it for you again, and I'm going to make the eighth notes staccato. Some of the eighth notes are marked staccato, like you see in measure 5 and in measure 7. Some of them aren't marked staccato, but they probably should be. And even if they're not, in a march, we would assume that these eighth notes here are all going to be played staccato just because it's the style of the piece we're playing. Here we go, all of the eighth notes staccato. 1, 2, 3. So already it's much more interesting when I have those notes staccato to provide the contrast. Now, the other articulation that I have written in here is accents. And there's two things we need to think about with accents. The first is just to add more weight to them. Just as a image in your head, imagine that when I play staccatos, they're very light and bouncy, as if I were using a very light hammer that I might use to hammer a tack into a wall to hang a picture. And I'll use a much heavier hammer, like a framing hammer, a small sledgehammer, to make those heavy notes, those accented notes. I've got to be careful because they still need to be tasteful and musical, but they do need to have a little bit more weight. So let me do it again. I'm just going to add more weight to the accented notes. Listen to the difference. 1, 2, 3. Now, that made it much more interesting, still having the weight in those notes, but you might have noticed that the accented note in 6 and in 14 sounded a little funny when I just gave it weight. It already has a little weight just by the fact that it's a long note on a weak beat. But to make it sound a little more musical, instead this time, listen to what I do to the note before the accented note. I'm going to start at measure number 5, and I'm going to play just measure 5 and 6, and this is the note. This is the note that I want you to listen for. Here I go. Did you hear the space that I added between beat 1 and beat 2? I'm never going to make an accented note short. Accented notes should be long and full value, but if I shorten the note that comes before the accent, it can really make that accented note stand out. Listen again. Shortening the note before an accent, creating a little bit of space, make those accented notes sound stronger and heavier by contrast. I'm now going to play the entire thing from 5 to 20. I want you to listen, and I would like you to rewind and then play along, paying attention to your articulations. Are you making the eighth note short and bouncy? Are you adding weight to the accents without making them really into louder or ugly? And are you adding space before the accents to make them stand out? Here I go. 1, 2, 3. All right, go ahead and practice. I look forward to hearing your recordings. Thanks for stopping by.